The taxi pulled away, leaving Sophie Collins standing alone in front of the two-story home she had cherished for more than 3 decades. The autumn air was crisp, tinged with the earthy scent of fallen leaves and distant wood smoke. Sophie adjusted her scarf, feeling a small thrill of relief 2 weeks away at a seaside retreat had been exactly what she needed to heal her tired heart after a year of widowhood. Now she was ready to step back into the warmth of her family home. At least, that's what she believed. She unlocked the front door, pushed it open, and froze. Her breath caught in her throat. The living room, the center of every family gathering, every holiday, every memory was gone. The oak floors her late husband had polished each spring were buried under glossy marble tiles that glared beneath harsh ceiling lights. The floral wallpaper she and her children had picked together when Andrew was little had been stripped away, replaced with sterile white paint. Her grandmother's rocking chair, where she had cradled Andrew as an infant, had disappeared entirely. If you were Sophie, returning from vacation only to find your daughter-in-law had remodeled your entire home without asking, what would you do? Stay silent and gather proof? Confront her immediately? Or walk away to keep your composure? Her suitcase slipped from her fingers and landed with a heavy thud on the cold marble. She could barely recognize the place where she had built her life. Oh good, you're finally home. The voice came from the staircase. Sophie's head jerked upward, and there she saw Lauren, her daughter-in-law, descending gracefully in a glittering dress. Lauren's smile stretched wide, but her eyes gleamed with something sharper than welcome. "Surprise," Lauren said, her tone dripping with false sweetness. "Do you love it? I redid everything while you were away. Your opinion doesn't matter anymore. This is our house now." Sophie's lips parted, but no words came. The walls seemed to close in around her. The front door swung open again, and 2 figures entered without hesitation. Lauren's parents, Patricia and Gerald, dragging large suitcases behind them. Gerald dropped his bag with a grunt and surveyed the room like a king, claiming new territory. "Finally," he said, "space that actually suits us. The master bedroom will be perfect." Sophie's voice cracked. "The master bedroom? That's mine. That's—" Patricia brushed past her with a dismissive wave. "Lauren told us you'd be moving into the guest room. It's cozier for you anyway. Don't worry, we'll make good use of the larger space." Lauren clapped her hands together as though presenting a grand gift. "It's all arranged, Sophie. Everything is more modern, more functional. You'll see it's better this way." Sophie staggered forward, desperate for something familiar. But everywhere she looked, there was nothing of her. The family photographs were gone. The quilt she had stitched with her late husband was missing. Even the mantel clock that had ticked steadily through the decades had vanished. Her throat tightened. "Where are my things?" Lauren's expression hardened. "Most of that old junk? Gone. You should be thanking me. I made this house livable again." The words struck Sophie like knives. She pressed a trembling hand against the wall for support. Gone? 30 years of love, of history, discarded like trash? "You should be grateful," Lauren added, tilting her head with mock concern. "At your age, it's time to let go of the past." Sophie's pulse roared in her ears. She stumbled down the hallway, needing to see for herself. Her steps led her to the master bedroom, her sanctuary, the room where she had kissed her husband goodnight for decades. The door creaked open, and Sophie's heart splintered. The room was stripped bare, her linens, her husband's chair, even the chest that held letters from their early years together gone. Then her eyes fell on the trash bin by the door. There, balanced on the edge, was the wedding photograph she had cherished for 40 years. The glass frame was cracked, the picture smeared with dust, discarded as if it were worthless. Her breath came in shallow gasps. Her knees buckled, and she clutched the doorframe to stay upright. In that instant, the truth pressed down on her like a weight. Her daughter-in-law hadn't simply redecorated. She had erased Sophie from her own home, piece by piece. Tears stung her eyes, but behind them simmered something stronger fury. "They think I'm too old, too weak to fight back. They have no idea who they're dealing with." Sophie sat on the edge of the stripped-down bed that no longer felt like hers. The cracked wedding photograph lay in her lap, its frame still dusted with shards of glass. Her chest ached, but her mind raced. This wasn't some impulsive home makeover. No, this was deliberate, calculated. Her thoughts drifted back to 3 weeks earlier, late at night in her son Andrew's real estate office. She had been helping him review quarterly reports, something she did out of habit even after retirement. Numbers had always been a comfort to her: concrete, logical, dependable. But that night, the numbers told a story she couldn't ignore. At first, it was small. A few $100s were misfiled, an invoice that didn't match its receipt. She had chalked it up to clerical errors. But the deeper she dug, the more unsettling patterns emerged. Inflated payments to contractors she had never heard of, checks cut to suppliers that didn't exist, bonuses logged for employees who didn't work there anymore. The total wasn't small. By the time Sophie closed her calculator, her hands were trembling. Nearly $50,000 is unaccounted for in just one quarter. And when she cross-checked older statements, the figure ballooned to more than $600,000 siphoned over the past 18 months. Her stomach had knotted as the realization struck. This wasn't a mistake. It was theft. And Lauren, sharp, ambitious, controlling Lauren, was the one with direct access to the accounts. Sophie had stared at the printouts under the flickering desk lamp, whispering to herself, "It can't be her. Andrew would never allow..." But the evidence was undeniable. Every suspicious transaction tied back to administrative approvals logged under Lauren's credentials. Her first instinct had been to call Andrew immediately, to demand he meet her at the office that very night, but she hesitated. Andrew adored his wife. He credited her with helping him relax, laugh, and finally balance his high-stress career with family life. He was blind to her sharp edges, deaf to her cutting remarks. And then there were the children. Lily, with her boundless imagination, and little Noah, who still clung to his mother's leg at school drop-off. How would they survive the fallout of seeing their mother exposed as a thief? Sophie's heart had screamed at her to act, but her love for her son and grandchildren whispered restraint. She had folded the papers back into the file drawer, locking away both the evidence and her terror. Not yet. Not until I know what to do. But now, sitting in her gutted bedroom with her memories dumped into trash bins, Sophie realized the truth. Lauren's remodeling wasn't about aesthetics. It was about control. Control of the house. Control of the family narrative. And, ultimately, control of the money. Sophie ran a weary hand across her face. She remembered Lauren's growing boldness in recent months, arriving late to Sunday dinners with flimsy excuses, rearranging Sophie's kitchen, hosting her own friends at Sophie's expense. Each slight had been small enough for Andrew to dismiss. But together they painted a chilling picture. Lauren was systematically erasing Sophie's authority in every corner of her life, and Sophie had let it happen. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. A text from Andrew lit the screen. "Back late tonight, don't wait up. Lauren said you're tired after your trip. Rest." Sophie stared at the words, bile rising in her throat. Lauren was already rewriting the story, even to her son. Her gaze drifted back to the broken photograph. She traced her husband's smile, the way his arm had curled protectively around her shoulders. "Robert," she whispered, her voice cracking, "what would you do if you were here?" Silence answered her, but in that silence, determination began to form. She couldn't stay quiet forever. Lauren was stealing more than furniture and memories. She was stealing Andrew's livelihood, her grandchildren's future, and the very legacy Sophie and Robert had worked decades to build. And Sophie would not allow it to continue. Her eyes hardened. She didn't yet know how or when, but one thing was certain. She would uncover every dollar Lauren had stolen, and she would find a way to make her pay. For now, though, she needed to play her role carefully. She would endure the humiliation, the gaslighting, the slow theft of her place in the family, but only long enough to gather proof strong enough to shatter Lauren's facade. Because Sophie Collins was no longer just a grieving widow trying to keep the peace. She was a mother, a protector, and a woman with nothing left to lose. And that made her dangerous. The house felt colder that night, even with every light blazing. Sophie sat alone at the kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea that had long since gone cold. The laughter of children echoed faintly upstairs, Lily and Noah's bedtime chatter, but instead of comforting her, the sound only tightened the knot in her chest. Her mind replayed the numbers she had uncovered in Andrew's office. $600,000. Enough to ruin him if exposed. Enough to cripple the family business he had worked so hard to build. And the thief was the woman he trusted most. For hours, Sophie wrestled with the same question. Should I tell him? If she confessed what she knew, Andrew's heart would shatter. His faith in Lauren, his marriage, his children's stability, everything would collapse. And who would he blame for starting that avalanche? His mother, the woman he already feared, was stuck in the past. But if she stayed silent, the theft would grow worse. Lauren would keep siphoning money until there was nothing left. And Sophie would have stood by, complicit in the destruction of her son's future. Her palms pressed hard against her eyes. "Robert, what would you have me do?" she whispered into the stillness. But no comforting answer came from the shadows of the kitchen. The sound of heels clicking on the marble snapped her upright. Lauren appeared in the doorway, her hair perfectly styled despite the late hour. She leaned casually against the frame, as though she already owned the house, and maybe, in her mind, she did. "You're still up," Lauren observed, her voice soft, almost pitying. "Jet lag, I suppose?" Sophie swallowed the words she wanted to spit back. Instead, she straightened, steadying her voice. "We need to talk." Lauren arched a brow, stepping into the kitchen. "About?" "The finances," Sophie said carefully. "I've seen the records, the missing funds, the false invoices." Her voice trembled, but she forced the words out. "I know it was you." For the briefest moment, Lauren's expression flickered. Then the mask slid back into place, her smile smooth and cold. "Oh, Sophie," she laughed softly as though humoring a child. "You've been through a lot. Sometimes numbers blur together when people your age." "Don't patronize me," Sophie snapped, slamming her palm against the table. The sound startled even her. "I may be old, but I'm not blind. I know what you've been doing." Lauren's eyes narrowed, the sweetness gone. "Prove it." The two words sliced through the air like a knife. Sophie's heart hammered because she knew Lauren was right. Andrew would never believe her without evidence. Worse, Lauren knew it too. "You won't say a word to Andrew," Lauren continued, her tone calm, deliberate. "Because you love him. You don't want to see him broken. You don't want to traumatize Lily and Noah. So you'll keep this between us, and I'll be more careful from now on." Sophie stared at her, horrified. "More careful? You're not even pretending to stop." Lauren leaned forward, her voice low, her perfume cloying. "You and I understand each other. I keep this family running the way I see fit. You keep your silence. Everyone wins." Sophie's throat tightened. "And if I don't?" Lauren's smile was razor sharp. "Then you'll find that Andrew already thinks you're forgetful, confused. It won't take much to convince him you're losing your memory. And once that seed is planted, nothing you say will matter." The words landed heavier than any blow. Sophie could picture it already. Andrew's pitying look, the concerned murmurs about her decline, her voice dismissed as paranoia. Her grip tightened on the mug in front of her, knuckles white. For a moment, she imagined hurling it against the wall, shattering the silence with ceramic shards. But she didn't. She forced herself to breathe, to stay still, to swallow her fury. "Good," Lauren murmured, mistaking Sophie's silence for surrender. "I'm glad we understand each other." She straightened, smoothing her dress. "Now, get some rest. Tomorrow's a new day. And please, Sophie, try not to stress about things you can't control." With that, she glided out of the kitchen, leaving behind only the faint echo of her heels on marble. Sophie sat frozen, every muscle rigid. Her heart screamed to storm upstairs, to shake Andrew awake and tell him everything. But Lauren's threat lingered. Confused. Forgetful. Losing her memory. She pressed her hands flat on the table, forcing her breath to slow. "No, not yet. Not until I can bury her with evidence she can't twist or erase." For the first time in months, a new clarity sparked in Sophie's chest. Lauren thought she had won. She thought Sophie would stay quiet forever. But Sophie wasn't broken. Not yet. She would gather proof. She would play the dutiful, docile mother-in-law. And when the time came, she would bring Lauren's entire empire of lies crashing down. And Sophie Collins would be the one to light the match. The next morning, Sophie awoke to the sound of voices drifting from the kitchen, Lauren's crisp tones and Patricia's loud, syrupy laugh. She stayed in her room, waiting until the clatter of dishes faded and the front door slammed shut. Only then did she slip out quietly, her mind already fixed on what she had to do. She needed answers. More than that, she needed to look her enemy in the eye and see what kind of monster dared to dismantle her family piece by piece. By noon, Sophie had texted Lauren, "Meet me at the coffee shop near the library, alone." The reply came within minutes. "Of course, dear," with a smiley face at the end, like a knife wrapped in velvet. The cafe was nearly empty when Sophie arrived. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, catching dust motes in the air. She chose a booth at the back, far from the barista's curious eyes. Her hands trembled as she adjusted the sugar packets, lining them up in perfect rows to steady her nerves. Then Lauren swept in. Perfect hair, perfect dress, perfect smile. She slid into the booth opposite Sophie, as though this were nothing more than a casual lunch between family. "You look tired," Lauren remarked, her eyes sharp even as her lips curved sweetly. "Travel can be so exhausting at your age." Sophie inhaled slowly. "Cut the act. I know what you've been doing." Lauren tilted her head. "Doing?" "The accounts," Sophie pressed. "The fake invoices, the stolen money. I've seen the records. Don't play dumb with me." For a heartbeat, Lauren's fingers tightened around her coffee cup. Then, just as quickly, her smile returned, smoother than ever. "That's a serious accusation," she said lightly. "Do you really think Andrew will believe you? Or anyone, for that matter?" Sophie leaned forward. "I raised that boy. I built the foundation of the business you're gutting. Don't underestimate me." Lauren's eyes glittered. "Oh, I don't underestimate you at all. I know exactly who you are, a lonely, grieving widow clinging to the past, and that's why I know you won't tell Andrew, because you love him too much to hurt him." "Oh." Her words sliced through Sophie's defenses. Lauren knew her weakness, her devotion to her son and grandchildren. Lauren stirred her coffee slowly, deliberately. "You see, Sophie, you can scream thief all you want, but who will listen? Andrew already thinks you've been forgetful. Do you want him to look at you with pity, to think his mother is losing her mind?" Sophie's throat constricted. "You're twisting everything." "I'm framing everything," Lauren corrected, her tone silky. "Framing you exactly the way I need, the confused matriarch who means well but can't quite keep up. It's believable, don't you think?" Sophie's hands shook, but she forced herself to stay steady. She wouldn't give Lauren the satisfaction of breaking down. Lauren leaned across the table, lowering her voice to a whisper. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to stop poking around. You're going to smile at Sunday dinners, play with the kids, and act like nothing is wrong. And in return, I'll keep this family together. Everyone wins. But if you don't—" She paused, letting the silence stretch, her eyes locked on Sophie's. "If you don't, you'll lose Andrew, you'll lose the children, and you'll lose this house, because once I prove you're incompetent, everything you love will belong to me." The clink of her spoon against the cup punctuated her threat like the strike of a gavel. For a long moment, Sophie couldn't breathe. She wanted to shout, to slap that smug smile off Lauren's face, but deep down she knew Lauren wasn't bluffing. She had already started planting seeds of doubt, and Andrew's trust in his wife was dangerously strong. So Sophie did the only thing she could. She stayed silent. Lauren smirked, satisfied. "That's what I thought. Good girl." She slid out of the booth with practiced elegance, leaving her coffee half full. "See you Sunday, Sophie. Don't forget to bring dessert. Everyone loves it when you try." The words dripped with mockery, but Lauren didn't look back as she left the cafe, heels clicking like the rhythm of a victory march. Sophie sat there long after she was gone, the hum of the espresso machine filling the hollow in her chest. Rage burned in her veins, but so did fear. Lauren wasn't just a thief. She was a strategist, and she had just made her move. But Sophie knew something Lauren didn't. She wasn't ready to fold. Not yet. If Lauren wanted a game, she had just found an opponent willing to play it to the very end. The days that followed were a masterclass in humiliation. Sophie had expected Lauren to move cautiously after their tense coffee shop meeting. Instead, her daughter-in-law grew bolder, weaving her manipulation into every corner of daily life like a spider spinning an invisible web. It began with the kitchen. Sophie had always kept her utensils in the same drawers, arranged with the precision of habit built over decades. One morning, she reached for her favorite skillet only to find the cabinet empty. She opened 3 more doors before discovering it was shoved behind a stack of unfamiliar pans. Lauren appeared at her shoulder with a bright smile. Oh, I thought I'd help organize. You're always misplacing things, Sophie. This way will be easier for you. Oh. Sophie forced a tight smile, but her heart clenched. I wasn't misplacing anything. You moved them. The next day, it was her coffee mugs. The sturdy ceramic ones she had used every morning since Andrew was a boy vanished. In their place sat delicate china cups with gold rims. Lauren's style, not hers. When Sophie asked, Lauren's reply was smooth and cutting. Those old mugs, they were chipped. Dangerous, really. I thought you'd appreciate the upgrade. An upgrade that made Sophie's kitchen feel foreign in her own hands. At Sunday dinner, the attacks grew sharper. Lauren breezed in late with Patricia and Gerald trailing behind her, carrying armfuls of groceries Sophie hadn't requested. We thought we'd bring ingredients for something modern, Lauren announced loudly as she unpacked imported cheeses and artisan bread. Sophie does her best, of course, but it's nice to expand the menu a little, don't you think, Andrew? Her son chuckled politely, kissing his wife on the cheek. Sure, variety's good. Sophie's roast sat untouched on the counter, steam rising into the silence of her defeat. When everyone finally sat to eat, Lauren offered faint praise wrapped in barbed wire. This roast is so classic, Sophie. I keep telling Andrew we should try lighter, healthier cuisine, but you know how he loves his comfort food. Andrew smiled as though it were a harmless joke. He didn't see Sophie's jaw tighten. He didn't hear the sting beneath the words. But the worst blow came with the children. One rainy afternoon, Sophie helped Lily with a school project, a hand-drawn family tree. Together, they colored branches and carefully glued photographs to construction paper. Lily's eyes sparkled as she placed Sophie's picture beside Andrew's, labeling it proudly, Grandma Sophie. The next morning, Sophie walked into the living room to find the project pinned on the wall, but her picture was gone. In its place was Patricia's smiling face. Cut from an old photo. Sophie's breath hitched. Lily, where's my photo? The little girl frowned. Mommy said we had to change it. She said Grandma Patricia is the one who helps us more now. Sophie's throat tightened, but she managed to smile for her granddaughter's sake. Later, she found her own photo crumpled in the trash bin. Every small cruelty chipped away at her. Lauren had a talent for performing generosity in public while slicing Sophie down in private. At a neighborhood gathering hosted at Sophie's house without her consent, Lauren loudly praised her. Did you try Sophie's dessert? She made it all by herself, she announced, tone syrupy sweet, as though Sophie were a child showing off a school project. Guests chuckled politely. Sophie smiled stiffly, burning inside. When she confronted Andrew afterward, his expression was patient but distant. Mom, I think you're reading too much into things. Lauren's just trying to include you. Include me? Sophie's voice cracked. She's erasing me. Andrew sighed. You've been under a lot of stress. Maybe you're imagining slights that aren't there. The words cut deeper than Lauren's insults ever could. That night, Sophie sat alone in the guest room, her new room staring at the walls painted a bland beige. Her husband's chair was gone, her quilt was gone, her place at the dinner table had become negotiable. And now, even her relationship with her son was slipping through her fingers. She clasped her hands in her lap, nails digging into her skin until they hurt. Every instinct screamed to lash out, to reclaim what was hers. But she knew if she reacted now, Lauren would twist it into another proof of her instability. No, she would endure. She would let Lauren think she was winning. She would absorb every humiliation like water on stone, and quietly, she would gather her evidence. Because Sophie was no longer just surviving, she was preparing. And when the time came, Lauren wouldn't see her coming. The rain had stopped just in time for Lily's birthday. Sophie had been planning the party for weeks, pouring her heart into every detail. She and Lily had chosen a fairy tale theme, sparkling wands, paper crowns, and a 3-tier cake shaped like a castle. Sophie spent hours at the dining table, carefully cutting glittery stars from cardstock, while Lily chattered about how she wanted to be the princess of the day. By morning, the house was transformed. Hand-sewn banners stretched across the living room, balloons shimmered in shades of lavender and silver, and the cake sat proudly on the kitchen counter, the smell of vanilla filling the air. Sophie felt a rare warmth in her chest. After weeks of Lauren's quiet sabotage, this day was hers. This day belonged to her and Lily. Or so she thought. The front door swung open just before noon. Lauren swept in with her mother, Patricia trailing behind, both of them hauling bags of decorations from a party store. "Change of plans," Lauren announced breezily, dropping the plastic bags onto the floor. "We're doing pink and gold, much more Instagram-worthy. Mom and I picked everything up this morning." Sophie's heart lurched. "But Lily and I—" "Don't worry, Sophie," Lauren interrupted, already pulling down the fairy tale banners. "It'll look so much better this way. Trust me." "Ugh!" Patricia chuckled, unfolding a garish gold backdrop. "Yes, dear, these look far more modern. Kids love bright colors, not glittery stars." Sophie's voice rose despite herself. "Lily and I worked on those decorations together. She was so excited." Lauren's smile sharpened. "And she'll be even more excited when she sees this. Besides, she's my daughter. I think I know what she prefers." Sophie's stomach twisted as she watched weeks of effort undone in minutes. Her carefully cut stars were swept into the trash. The castle cake looked almost out of place against the shiny pink balloons Lauren now tied around the chairs. Lily wandered into the room mid-transformation, her eyes wide. "Grandma, where are the fairies?" Sophie knelt beside her, struggling to keep her voice steady. "I don't know, sweetheart." "We made them together, didn't we?" Lauren crouched quickly, her tone sugary. "Oh, honey, Grandma means well, but sometimes grown-ups have different ideas. Don't worry, you'll love this theme even more." Lily's face fell. She glanced back at Sophie, confusion clouding her eyes. By the time the guests arrived, the house looked nothing like Sophie's vision. Parents admired the gold and pink streamers, complimenting Lauren on her creativity. "You're amazing at this, Lauren," one mother gushed. "Such attention to detail." Thank you," Lauren said graciously, waving toward the cake. "I stayed up late making sure everything would be perfect." Sophie froze. Her cake. Her hands had measured every cup of flour, frosted every tower. Yet Lauren accepted the praise with a radiant smile, as if the credit belonged entirely to her. In the kitchen, Sophie busied herself refilling drinks, her ears burning with every compliment that passed Lauren's way. Through the doorway, she caught glimpses of her granddaughter, wearing a tiara Lauren had purchased that morning, blowing out candles while Lauren stood proudly beside her. No one mentioned the hours Sophie had spent making that tiara of paper lilies now stuffed in the trash. After the last guest departed, Sophie lingered in the quiet living room, picking stray bits of wrapping paper from the floor. The gold backdrop hung lopsided, mocking her. Andrew entered with a tired smile. "Great party, Mom. Lauren really outdid herself, huh?" Sophie's throat tightened. She set down a half-empty plate of cake. "Don't you think she should have discussed the changes with me first?" Andrew looked puzzled. "Why? It's Lily's party. Lauren knows what she likes. But Lily and I—" "Mom," Andrew interrupted gently, his tone patient, the way one might soothe a confused relative. "You're making this more complicated than it needs to be. Lauren was just trying to make it perfect. You should be grateful she included you at all." Grateful. The word hit like a stone. Grateful that she had been erased from her own granddaughter's birthday. Andrew clapped her shoulder, oblivious. "Get some rest, okay? You've done enough." Then he left, humming as if nothing were wrong. Sophie sank into a chair, her hands trembling. She glanced at the trash bin where the paper stars peeked from under discarded plates. Her chest burned with humiliation, but beneath it smoldered something harder, sharper resolve. Lauren might have stolen the spotlight today. She might have twisted Andrew's perception and humiliated Sophie in front of the neighbors, but Sophie knew the truth. And one day soon, she would make sure everyone else knew it too. It was a Tuesday when Sophie returned from a simple errand at the grocery store and found a moving truck parked in her driveway. Two men in uniform were hauling boxes through the front door, their heavy boots thudding across the marble floor that no longer felt like hers. For a split second, she thought they had the wrong address, that some bizarre mistake had been made, but then she saw Patricia standing on the porch, directing traffic with a coffee cup in hand, and Gerald lounging against the truck with a smug grin. "Perfect timing," Patricia called cheerfully as if this were all arranged. "We were just getting settled. The master bedroom has such lovely light. It'll be perfect for us." Sophie felt her pulse pound in her temples. "The master bedroom?" she whispered, clutching her grocery bag so tightly the paper tore. "That's my room." Lauren appeared in the doorway with her usual radiant smile, her arms folded as if she were proud of a job well done. "Oh, don't be dramatic, Sophie. We discussed this weeks ago. Mom and Dad need more space, and the guest room will suit you fine." Sophie stared at her blankly. "We never discussed anything." Lauren tilted her head, feigning pity. "Maybe you forgot. It happens." Patricia brushed past Sophie, carrying a lamp into the house as though she owned it. Gerald followed with a television set under his arm, already talking about where he'd set it up. Within an hour, Sophie's sanctuary had been transformed into their territory. Patricia spread her clothes across Sophie's dresser, humming as if the room had always been hers, while Gerald flopped onto Sophie's bed and declared it the most comfortable he'd ever tried. Sophie watched from the hallway, clutching her husband's old sweater, which she had pulled hastily from the closet before it disappeared into Patricia's boxes. The sweater smelled faintly of cedar and aftershave, a relic of the man who had built this house with his own hands. Now strangers were laying claim to it, tossing her memories aside as if they were clutter. That night, Sophie tried to sleep in the cramped guest room, surrounded by mismatched furniture and beige walls that seemed to press in on her. She lay awake listening to Gerald's booming voice from her former bedroom and Patricia's shrill laughter echoing down the hallway. They ate her food, rearranged her kitchen, and criticized her belongings. "These plates are outdated," Patricia remarked the next morning, holding one of Sophie's china dishes. "We should replace them with something more practical." Lauren smiled approvingly. "Mom has such a good eye for these things." Sophie bit back her words, her chest burning. Even the small comforts she had left the rhythm of her daily routines were being dismantled piece by piece. Gerald commandeered the living room television, filling the house with sports commentary and political debates at deafening volume. Patricia reorganized the pantry, tossing Sophie's carefully labeled jars and insisting her system was better. And Andrew, blinded by loyalty, saw none of it. "They're just settling in, Mom," he said when Sophie tried to explain. "It's temporary." But Sophie saw the way Patricia and Gerald unpacked their boxes with no intention of leaving. She saw the way Lauren beamed at them, as if proud to have succeeded in planting her parents firmly in Sophie's life. And she saw the way Andrew looked at her with a hint of doubt every time Lauren murmured about her forgetfulness. Late one night, Sophie stood in the doorway of her old bedroom, watching Patricia sleep in her bed beneath her quilt, the quilt she had stitched with Robert decades ago. Gerald snored beside her, one arm flung across Sophie's pillow. The sight made her stomach twist. She clutched the sweater tighter, fighting the urge to scream. Instead, she retreated to the guest room, shut the door, and pressed her forehead to the cool wall. Her home was gone. Her place in the family was shrinking by the day. But even as despair threatened to swallow her, a spark of determination flickered. They thought they had pushed her into a corner. They thought she would fade quietly. They were wrong. Sophie Collins had been erased from her own house, but she would not be erased from her own life. Emma's school play had been marked on Sophie's calendar for months. The little girl had begged her grandmother to come, her eyes shining as she practiced lines from Little Red Riding Hood in the living room. Sophie had promised to be there, to sit in the front row and cheer louder than anyone else. That promise carried her through the quiet humiliation of sharing her home with Lauren's parents. It gave her something to look forward to, something pure and unspoiled by Lauren's grasping hands. On the evening of the play, Sophie lay out her nicest blouse, smoothing the wrinkles with trembling fingers. She imagined Emma scanning the crowd and finding her face, that radiant smile lighting up the stage. She held on to that image like a lifeline. But just as Sophie slipped on her coat, a knock rattled her bedroom door. Lauren entered without waiting for permission, Patricia right behind her, dressed as though attending a gala. Patricia clutched a bouquet of roses wrapped in gold paper. "So sorry, Sophie," Lauren began, her voice laced with false regret. "There's been a change of plans." Sophie froze. "What do you mean?" "There are only 3 reserved seats in the front row," Lauren explained smoothly. "Andrew, me, and, well, of course, Patricia. She is Emma's grandmother after all." The words hit Sophie like a blow. "I'm her grandmother too," she whispered. Lauren tilted her head with mock sympathy. "Oh, don't take it personally. Emma's such a mature child. She'll understand. Besides, you'll have other chances to see her perform." Patricia adjusted her bouquet, smiling smugly. "I can't wait to be part of her big night." They left together in Andrew's car, laughter trailing behind them as the front door slammed. Sophie stood motionless in her coat, her chest heaving. Rage battled despair inside her. They were stealing her role as grandmother right in front of her, and Andrew either couldn't see it or chose not to. But Sophie refused to break her promise. She drove herself to the school, bought a general admission ticket, and slipped quietly into a seat in the back row. The auditorium buzzed with chatter and the rustle of programs. Parents crowded the aisles, snapping photos, saving seats, whispering proudly. Sophie sat alone, hands folded tightly in her lap, her heart pounding as the lights dimmed. When the curtain rose and Emma stepped onto the stage, Sophie's breath caught. Her granddaughter wore a red hood that dwarfed her small frame, but her voice carried clear and strong. "What big eyes you have, grandmother." Sophie clapped harder than anyone, tears streaming down her cheeks. Emma's eyes scanned the crowd, pausing when they didn't find Sophie in the front row. Then, as if pulled by instinct, the girl looked further back. Their gazes locked. Sophie waved, small and tentative. Emma's face lit up with relief. She knew her grandmother had kept her word. After the play, Sophie wove through the crowd, eager to hug her granddaughter. Emma darted toward her, still in costume, throwing small arms around Sophie's waist. "Grandma, you came!" she squealed. "Did you see my part with the wolf?" "You were magnificent, sweetheart," Sophie whispered, kissing her hair. "The best little Red Riding Hood I've ever seen." But before she could say more, Lauren swooped in with Patricia at her side. "There you are, Emma," Lauren cooed. "Come take pictures with Grandmother Patricia. She brought you these beautiful flowers." Emma hesitated, glancing between Sophie and Patricia. "But Grandma Sophie is here too. Can she be in the pictures?" "Of course," Lauren said, her smile tight. "Maybe Grandma Sophie can take the pictures for us." The words stung worse than any slap. Sophie stood in silence, holding the camera as Emma posed with Lauren and Patricia. She pressed the button, capturing moments she should have been part of, forced to immortalize her own exclusion. That night, back in the suffocating beige of the guest room, Sophie sat on the edge of her bed, the echoes of Emma's performance still ringing in her ears. Her granddaughter had saved her a seat, and she had been pushed to the shadows. Tears fell freely now, dripping onto her hands. But beneath the grief was a clarity sharper than ever. Lauren wasn't just stealing money. She wasn't just stealing control of the house. She was stealing Sophie's very identity within the family, one memory at a time. And Sophie knew if she didn't fight back soon, there would be nothing left of her at all. The night after Emma's play, Sophie lay awake, staring at the ceiling of the guest room. Sleep wouldn't come. The humiliation of being pushed aside, of holding the camera instead of her granddaughter's hand, twisted like a knife in her chest. But behind the hurt, something else pulsed stronger resolve. Lauren had turned family moments into weapons, but money had always been Sophie's battlefield. And if Lauren thought she could erase her there too, she was gravely mistaken. The next morning, Sophie made a decision. While Lauren shuttled Patricia to a doctor's appointment and Gerald lounged in the living room with the television blaring, Sophie told Andrew she wasn't feeling well and would rest. Instead, she drove to Andrew's office downtown, clutching the extra set of keys she had never returned after retirement. The office was quiet during the lunch hour, the blinds half drawn against the midday Sunday. Sophie's heart pounded as she slipped inside, locking the door behind her. She sat at Andrew's desk, opened the filing cabinet, and pulled out the financial records she had glimpsed before her vacation. The numbers had haunted her ever since. She spread the papers across the desk bank statements, invoices, receipts, and began cross-referencing them with the company's digital files. For the first hour, it was tedious, but then the pattern emerged with brutal clarity. Lauren hadn't just skimmed small amounts from the business. She had created an entirely fictitious renovation project, complete with fake vendor contracts, forged signatures, and monthly expense reports. Sophie's hands shook as she read. For nearly a year, the company had been funding a luxury housing development that didn't exist. Checks had been cut to suppliers who weren't real, and payroll had been logged for workers who had never been hired. Each fraudulent payment funneled neatly into a shell account that, after a few transfers, landed directly under Lauren's control. The total made Sophie's breath stop, $600,000 and still climbing. Her stomach churned. Andrew had trusted Lauren with administrative oversight, believing she was simply handling paperwork to support the business. He would never have imagined she was gutting the company from the inside out. And if word of this fraud reached clients or partners, the family's reputation would collapse overnight. Sophie sat back, pressing a trembling hand to her mouth. This wasn't just theft, it was annihilation. Lauren wasn't planning for the family's future. She was planning to destroy it, to strip everything until nothing remained but what she controlled. For a moment, Sophie considered calling Andrew right then, telling him everything. But the memory of his face after Lily's birthday resurfaced his patient, pitying expression as he told her she was making things too complicated. If she confronted him now without undeniable proof, Lauren would twist it into more evidence of Sophie's instability. No, she needed to gather everything. Documents, signatures, and records that even Andrew couldn't deny. Her phone buzzed in her purse, making her jump. A text from Lauren lit the screen. "We're picking up the kids. Don't forget, Mom's making her famous stew tonight. Be on time." Sophie exhaled shakily. Even here, surrounded by damning evidence, Lauren's grip on her life was inescapable. She gathered the papers into neat stacks, slipping the most incriminating into a folder she tucked under her arm. She replaced everything else carefully, leaving no sign she had been there. As she locked the cabinet, footsteps echoed in the hall. Sophie's heart stopped. The door handle rattled. Quickly, she slid the folder under a stack of blank forms on the desk, forcing her expression to remain calm as the door swung open. Lauren stood in the doorway, her silhouette framed by the fluorescent light. "Well, well," she said smoothly, stepping inside. "What a surprise. Andrew said you were sick today." Sophie's pulse roared in her ears. "Just wanted some quiet. Thought I'd tidy a few things." Lauren's gaze swept across the desk, lingering a second too long on the papers. Then she smiled that razor-sharp smile. "You really should let me handle this. Numbers get confusing when you're older. I wouldn't want you to make a mistake." Sophie forced a polite nod, clutching the folder tightly under her arm as she moved past Lauren. She could feel her daughter-in-law's eyes burning into her back. By the time Sophie reached her car, her hands were shaking so hard she could barely fit the key into the ignition. She had what she needed, proof of Lauren's fraud. But now Lauren suspected she was digging, and that made the game infinitely more dangerous. Driving home, Sophie whispered aloud to steady herself. "Hold on, Robert. I'll protect what we built. I won't let her take it all." But deep down, she knew Lauren wouldn't go down quietly. And if Sophie had crossed a line today, Lauren would strike back harder than ever before. Dinner that evening felt like a stage play Sophie hadn't agreed to perform in. Patricia bustled around the kitchen, claiming the space as her own, while Gerald barked at the television in the living room. Andrew sat at the table, scrolling through his phone, oblivious to the shifting undercurrents. And Lauren, always the director, watched everything with a smile too polished to be genuine. Halfway through the meal, Lauren turned to Sophie with syrupy concern. "Sophie, didn't you say you were making dessert tonight?" The children were so excited. Sophie blinked. "Dessert? I never said—" She stopped herself, realizing too late that Lauren's trap had already sprung. Andrew looked up. "You forgot, Mom?" "I didn't forget," Sophie said quickly, her fork clattering onto her plate. "I was never asked." Lauren sighed softly, shaking her head with just the right measure of pity. "It's okay. We all forget things sometimes." Her voice was gentle, but her eyes glinted with triumph. The children exchanged glances, confused, while Andrew's brow furrowed. "Mom, maybe you're just tired." Sophie's chest tightened. She wanted to scream, to hurl accusations across the table, but she forced herself to swallow the fury. Arguing now would only play into Lauren's narrative. Later, as Sophie washed dishes alone, Patricia had conveniently disappeared. Lauren appeared beside her with a dish towel. "Let me help," she said sweetly, taking a plate from Sophie's hands. They worked in silence for a few moments, the clatter of silverware punctuating the quiet. Then Lauren leaned closer, her voice pitched low enough that only Sophie could hear. "You see how easy it is? One little slip, and Andrew's already worried you're forgetting things. Keep resisting me, and I'll have him convinced you're not fit to manage your own affairs." Sophie's hands trembled as she scrubbed the plate. "You're vile," she whispered. Lauren smiled faintly. "I'm practical. And soon the lawyers and doctors will agree with me. Power of attorney is such a useful thing. You'll be safe in assisted living, and I'll take care of the house and the business." The words chilled Sophie to her core. Assisted living. She could almost hear the echo of a door slamming shut, locking her away from her family and her freedom. That night, alone in the guest room, Sophie spread the incriminating documents across her bed. Bank statements, forged contracts, falsified invoices, all photographed carefully with her phone. Her fingers shook as she organized them into folders. "If she convinces Andrew I'm incompetent, no one will believe me. I need evidence that speaks louder than her lies." But Lauren wasn't content with subtle hints. Over the next week, she escalated. A set of Sophie's keys went missing. When Sophie insisted she had left them on the counter, Lauren arched a brow and murmured, "Are you sure? You've been misplacing things a lot lately." A conversation Sophie swore had never happened suddenly became proof of her forgetfulness. "Remember, Sophie, we agreed my parents would stay until Christmas," Lauren said in front of Andrew. When Sophie protested, Andrew frowned. "Mom, Lauren told me you were fine with it." And then came the cruelest blow. Sophie's prescription bottle vanished from her nightstand. When she asked if anyone had seen it, Lauren handed it to her days later with a delicate laugh. "It was in the pantry, Sophie. You must have put it there by mistake." Each moment chipped away at Andrew's trust. Sophie saw it in his eyes, the hesitation before he believed her, the subtle pity in his tone. Lauren was winning. But Sophie refused to surrender. Every time Lauren twisted reality, Sophie wrote it down, time-stamped and documented. Every lie became another weapon she would one day turn against her tormentor. Still, as she lay awake at night, Sophie knew the noose was tightening. Lauren was building a case brick by brick, painting her as a confused old woman losing her grip on reality. And if Sophie didn't strike back soon, the next chapter of her life would be written not by her own hand but by Lauren's. In the dark silence, Sophie whispered into the emptiness of the guest room, clutching her late husband's sweater to her chest. "Hold on, Robert. Hold on a little longer. I will not let her bury me alive." The office was supposed to be empty on Saturdays. That was why Sophie chose that day to return under the guise of retrieving her reading glasses, but in truth, to gather more evidence. The building was quiet, the hum of the air conditioning her only companion as she slipped down the hallway. Her shoes clicked softly on the linoleum, each step echoing in her chest like a drumbeat. She was halfway to Andrew's office when a voice stopped her cold. Lauren's voice. Sophie froze, pressing herself against the wall, every nerve in her body sparking with dread. She peered around the corner and saw the door to Andrew's office ajar, light spilling into the corridor. Inside, Lauren's tone was low and urgent, the kind of voice she reserved for manipulation and schemes. "Power of attorney should be straightforward," Lauren was saying, especially given her decline. Sophie's breath caught. "Decline?" Lauren continued, calm and calculating. "Andrew's already noticed her memory issues. With the right documentation from the doctor, it'll be simple. Once I have legal authority, the accounts can be liquidated cleanly." Sophie's knees nearly buckled. "She's going to take everything." There was a pause. Lauren's voice softened, but the cruelty in it cut like a blade. "The house will be trickier, but if she's declared incompetent, we can force a sale for her own good. Assisted living is the safest option. By Christmas, she'll be settled, and we'll have control over everything." The words slammed into Sophie's chest like a physical blow. Assisted living, sold the house, liquidated accounts, all planned as if she were already gone. The person on the other end of the call said something Sophie couldn't make out. Lauren chuckled softly, the sound devoid of warmth. "Don't worry. Andrew thinks it's his idea. He's so concerned for his poor mother. He doesn't realize every forgetful episode has been carefully orchestrated." Sophie pressed her fist to her mouth to keep from gasping. Suddenly, the missing keys, the forgotten conversations, the misplaced medication, all of it made sense. Lauren hadn't just been tormenting her. She'd been laying the groundwork to paint her as incompetent. Her heart pounded so loudly she was afraid Lauren would hear it through the wall. "I need another month, maybe 2, Lauren continued. "Then we'll talk to her doctor about the stress she's under, her inability to manage finances at her age. He'll sign off. Once I have guardianship, the money's mine." The voice on the phone murmured again, and Lauren's reply was ice cold. "It's not theft if I have the paperwork. It's just good business." Sophie's entire body shook. She felt caged, suffocated. For a moment, panic threatened to overwhelm her, but then a different sensation rose within her, a quiet, burning rage. She had given Lauren the benefit of the doubt. She had endured humiliation after humiliation for Andrew's sake. But this wasn't just cruelty. This was annihilation. Lauren was plotting to erase her, to strip her of dignity, her home, her legacy, even her voice. The sound of footsteps jolted her back. Lauren was moving toward the door. In a flash, Sophie darted into the supply closet across the hall, pulling the door shut just as Lauren stepped out. Through the narrow crack, Sophie saw her daughter-in-law stroll down the hall, phone in hand, humming softly like someone without a care in the world. Only when the click of her heels faded did Sophie allow herself to breathe. She leaned against the wall of the tiny closet, her pulse racing, tears brimming in her eyes. She stayed there for 10 minutes, maybe longer, until her legs stopped trembling. Then, with a steely calm she hadn't felt in months, Sophie whispered to the darkness, "She thinks I'll go quietly. She thinks I'll accept this. But she's wrong." When she finally stepped out of the closet, Sophie was no longer the woman Lauren had been gaslighting into silence. She was a fighter, armed with the truth, and she knew what she had to do next. Lauren had played her game carefully, but Sophie had just heard the winning move. Now it was her turn to strike back. The morning after overhearing Lauren's call, Sophie sat at the kitchen table with her phone clutched in both hands. Her tea went cold, untouched, her heart still pounding with the echo of Lauren's words. By Christmas, she'll be in assisted living. For the first time, Sophie knew she couldn't fight this war alone. She scrolled through her contacts until her finger hovered over a name she hadn't dialed in years, Detective Carla Reyes. Years ago, Carla had spoken at Sophie's church about financial scams targeting seniors. Sophie remembered her as sharp, kind, and unflinchingly direct. With trembling hands, she pressed call. "Detective Reyes," came the voice on the other end. "Detective, this is Sophie Collins." "I think no. I know I'm being targeted. By my daughter-in-law." Her words spilled out, shaky, but urgent. "She's stealing from our business, gaslighting me, trying to have me declared incompetent. I have proof." There was a pause. Then Reyes's voice steadied her. "Mrs. Collins, listen carefully. If you have documentation, you've already done the hardest part. Can you bring it to me today?" "Yes," Sophie whispered. "I can." That afternoon, Sophie sat in a plain gray office at the precinct, a folder of documents spread across Reyes's desk. Bank statements, forged invoices, false contracts, each page another brick in Lauren's crumbling facade. Reyes studied them intently, her sharp eyes narrowing as she flipped page after page. "This is serious," Reyes said finally. "Textbook elder financial abuse and corporate fraud. She's careful but not careful enough. With these records, we can build a case. But we'll need corroboration, someone to back up your story, preferably from inside the family circle or a professional she tried to manipulate." Sophie's chest tightened. "She's already working on the doctor, Dr. Miller. She's trying to convince him I'm losing my memory." Reyes leaned forward. "Would you be willing to let me speak to him?" Sophie hesitated, doubt gnawing at her. Dr. Miller had been her physician for 30 years, but what if Lauren had already poisoned him against her? Still, she nodded. "Do it, please." 2 days later, Reyes called. "Mrs. Collins, you need to come with me. Dr. Miller wants to see you." Her heart hammered as she followed the detective into the doctor's office. Dr. Miller rose to greet them, his face flushed with embarrassment. "Sophie, I owe you an apology," he said immediately. "Lauren came to me weeks ago, claiming she was worried about your mental health. She described incidents, confusion, forgetfulness, misplaced items that painted a concerning picture. I believed her." Sophie's throat tightened. "You thought I was losing my mind." Dr. Miller lowered his eyes. "I see now that I was manipulated." She brought examples, stories, and even mentioned she feared someone might be exploiting your confusion. It played right into my biases. But yesterday, Detective Reyes showed me the financial records. And I realized Lauren wasn't protecting you. She was setting you up. Relief washed over Sophie so suddenly she nearly wept. For the first time in months, someone believed her. Someone saw through Lauren's act. "I'll testify," Dr. Miller continued firmly. "I'll put in writing exactly what she told me and how she tried to influence my medical judgment. What she did wasn't just fraudulent, it was cruel." Detective Reyes placed a reassuring hand on Sophie's shoulder. "With Dr. Miller's testimony, your evidence, and my team's investigation, we have enough to move forward. We can stop her before she files for guardianship." For the first time, Sophie felt the weight on her chest ease. She wasn't alone anymore. The walls Lauren had built around her were cracking, and light was seeping in. That night, back in the beige-walled guest room, Sophie stared at the ceiling and allowed herself a long, shuddering breath. She thought of Robert, of the promise she had made to protect their family. She thought of Andrew, blinded by love but not beyond saving. And she thought of her grandchildren who deserved to grow up knowing the truth. Lauren believed she had silenced Sophie. But now Sophie had allies. And together, they would make sure Lauren's empire of lies collapsed in front of everyone she had deceived. Sophie chose a quiet cafe on the edge of town, far from Lauren's watchful eyes. She had rehearsed this conversation for days, turning it over and over in her mind. How could she tell her son that the woman he adored, the mother of his children, was a thief and a manipulator? How could she shatter his heart without breaking him entirely? Andrew arrived late, his tie loosened, his face tired from another long day at the office. He slid into the booth across from her, giving her a puzzled look. "Mom, you sounded urgent. What's going on? Is this about the house again? Because Lauren told me—" Sophie raised a hand, cutting him off. Her voice was steady, firmer than she expected. "Andrew, I need you to listen. Please, no interruptions, just listen." Something in her tone made him sit back, wary. She reached into her bag and pulled out a thick folder. With deliberate care, she slid it across the table toward him. "These are records from the business. Bank statements, invoices, contracts. I've checked and rechecked. Lauren has been stealing from us. Hundreds of thousands of dollars." Andrew frowned, but curiosity made him open the folder. At first, his eyes scanned, skepticism written across his face, but the further he read, the slower his movements became. His lips parted as recognition dawned signatures he knew weren't his, vendors he'd never met, expenses that made no sense. "She created a project that doesn't exist," Sophie explained softly. "A housing development on paper only. She forged your signature, redirected payments, and funneled the money into her own accounts. $600,000, Andrew. Gone." His face drained of color. That's impossible. She wouldn't—" He stopped, choking on the words. Sophie's heart ached as she watched the war inside him, the instinct to defend his wife battling against the evidence staring him in the face. "I wish it weren't true," she said gently, "but it is." For 20 long minutes, Andrew read in silence. His hands trembled as he turned each page. By the time he closed the folder, his knuckles were white. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" His voice was hoarse, almost broken. Sophie blinked back tears. "Because I knew what it would do to you. Because I hoped God help me. I hoped she'd stop. But then I overheard her. She's not stopping, Andrew. She's planning to take everything. She wants me declared incompetent so she can gain power of attorney. She's already started convincing you, hasn't she, that I'm forgetful, that I'm confused." Andrew's head dropped into his hands. He groaned, a raw sound that tore through Sophie's chest. She did say things. She made me think, "Oh God, Mom." Sophie reached across the table, gripping his hand. "Listen to me. You are not at fault for trusting her. She's skilled at this. She fooled me at first, too, but you need to see it now before it's too late." When Andrew lifted his head, his eyes were wet, his expression haunted. "What about Emma and Noah? What happens to them when this all comes out?" "They'll stay with you," Sophie said firmly. "You are their father. They need you more than ever. But they also need the truth, Andrew. They need to know their mother's choices don't define them." For a long moment, he just stared at her. Then, slowly, he squeezed her hand back. "You've been fighting this alone, haven't you?" "Yes." Sophie's voice cracked. "But not anymore. I went to Detective Reyes. I have support. Dr. Miller is willing to testify about how she tried to manipulate him. We can stop her, Andrew, but only if we stand together." Silence stretched between them, broken only by the clink of dishes in the cafe. Finally, Andrew exhaled, shoulders sagging. "I don't know how to explain this to my kids. How do I tell them their mother is a criminal?" Sophie's heart twisted. "One day at a time, with love, with honesty. We'll figure it out together." For the first time in months, Andrew's eyes softened. He looked at his mother, not with pity, not with doubt, but with trust. And Sophie knew then Lauren had lost her greatest weapon. Monday morning dawned crisp and bright, the kind of morning that once would have filled Sophie with quiet joy. Instead, she sat at the kitchen table, heart pounding, pretending to read the newspaper while she listened for the sound of cars pulling into the driveway. Detective Reyes had been clear. Act normal, follow your routine, and wait. Lauren swept into the kitchen in her silk robe, carrying herself like a queen. "Up early again?" she remarked, pouring herself coffee. "I was thinking, Sophie, maybe it's time you stepped back from the finances. Andrew agrees it would be less stressful for you. I can handle everything from now on." Sophie folded the newspaper with deliberate calm. "At my age, perhaps retirement isn't such a bad idea," she replied, her voice mild. Lauren blinked, clearly thrown off by Sophie's easy compliance. She had expected resistance, not surrender. "So you'll cooperate? You'll let me manage the accounts?" "If that's what's best for the family," Sophie said, her lips curving into a small smile that Lauren mistook for defeat. "Satisfied?" Lauren sipped her coffee. "Good. Then tomorrow we'll meet with the accountant and transfer the signatory authority. By the end of the week, this will all be settled." Sophie's pulse raced. Tomorrow would have been too late. Thankfully, Reyes hadn't waited. The low rumble of engines outside made Sophie's breath hitch. She glanced casually at the clock, forcing her expression to remain calm as unmarked cars rolled to a stop in the driveway. Moments later, a sharp knock rattled the front door. Gerald, still in his slippers, opened it and froze as uniformed officers flooded inside. "Mrs. Lauren Collins?" a stern voice called. "You're under arrest for financial fraud, forgery, and elder abuse." The mug slipped from Lauren's hand, shattering on the floor. "What?" she gasped, her composure cracking. "This is a mistake. My mother-in-law is confused. She—" Detective Reyes stepped forward, badge glinting. "We have extensive documentation of your crimes, and your parents as well. Gerald, Patricia, you're both coming with us." Patricia shrieked, clutching the kitchen counter. "We didn't do anything." But officers were already producing handcuffs. Gerald sputtered. "This is outrageous. We have rights." "You'll have your chance in court," Reyes replied coolly. Lauren turned on Sophie, eyes blazing with venom. "You did this. You think you've won? Andrew will never believe you. He'll—" "Lauren!" The single word cut her off. Andrew stood in the doorway, his face pale but resolute, the folder of evidence clutched in his hand. His voice trembled, but it carried a finality Lauren had never heard from him before. "It's over. I know everything." For the first time, Lauren's mask shattered completely. She lunged toward him, her wrists snapping against the officer's grip. "Andrew, please. She's lying. She's trying to turn you against me." Andrew's jaw tightened. "No. You did that yourself." The officers pulled her back, securing her wrists. She thrashed, screaming protests, but they fell flat against the weight of the truth. Sophie rose slowly from her chair, every muscle trembling with relief. She had imagined this moment so many times, wondered if it would ever come. Now, watching Lauren being dragged from the house that had nearly become her prison, she felt something she hadn't dared to in months: freedom. As the patrol cars drove away, silence settled over the house. Patricia's perfume lingered in the air, Gerald's loud voice gone, Lauren's sharp heels no longer clicking across the marble floors. Andrew sank into a chair, burying his face in his hands. "God, Mom, what have I done? I let her manipulate me. I let her make me doubt you." Sophie touched his shoulder gently. "You were trying to be a good husband. You couldn't see what she really was. But now you do. That's what matters." From the hallway, small footsteps approached. Emma peeked around the corner, Noah clutching her hand. "Daddy? Where's Mommy?" Andrew swallowed hard, his eyes red as he turned to his children. Sophie's heart ached, but she knew this conversation would shape the rest of their lives. She stepped back, giving him space. "She won't be coming home for a while," Andrew said softly, pulling them both into his arms. "She made mistakes that hurt our family. But you're safe. We're together. That's what matters." "I bet." Sophie watched as Emma buried her face against her father's chest, and Noah whispered, "We'll stay with Grandma, right?" "Yes," Andrew promised, glancing at Sophie with tear-filled eyes. "We'll stay with Grandma." In that moment, Sophie felt the weight lift from her shoulders. The house was still scarred, her memories bruised, but it was hers again. More importantly, her family was hers again. Lauren thought she had written the ending of Sophie's story, but Sophie had turned the page, and for the first time in a long time, she could finally breathe. Spring sunlight spilled through the windows, warming the kitchen table where Sophie sat with a cup of fresh coffee. For the first time in months, the house felt alive in the way it once had, laughter drifting from the backyard, the smell of pancakes sizzling on the stove, Andrew humming while helping Emma with homework. The walls no longer echoed with Patricia's shrill commands or Gerald's booming voice. Instead, the house breathed again. It had been weeks since the arrest. Lauren's name appeared daily in the news, tied to words like fraud and abuse. Sophie didn't read the articles. She had no interest in reliving the pain. What mattered was here, her son and grandchildren safe, her home reclaimed, and the future of their family no longer hanging in the balance of Lauren's lies. Andrew had moved back into the house with the children, and little by little they were piecing together a new rhythm. Emma often lingered in the kitchen with Sophie, asking to learn recipes, her small hands eager to measure flour or stir sauces. Noah discovered Robert's old toolbox in the garage and spent afternoons by Sophie's side, hammering bits of wood into crooked but proud little projects. One evening, Andrew placed a folder on the table, the company's latest financial report. He looked at his mother with a mixture of humility and gratitude. "I can't do this without you," he said simply. And Sophie, for the first time in years, felt recognized not as a burden, not as someone to be managed, but as a partner. Sometimes, in the quiet hours before bed, Sophie thought about Lauren, about how close she had come to losing everything, her home, her dignity, her family. A shiver would run down her spine, but then she would remember the strength she had found when everything seemed hopeless. She had not only survived, she had fought back. Looking out the window at Emma and Noah chasing fireflies, Sophie whispered to the memory of her late husband, "We're okay now, Robert. I kept my promise. I protected what we built." And for the first time in a long time, Sophie believed it. What would you have done if you were in Sophie's place? Would you have stayed silent or fought back against Lauren sooner? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one of them. And if you want more powerful family stories like this, don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss the next chapter. Your support means the world to me. Thank you for being here.